All right, good evening, everyone. We're here to talk about racial equity. Before we begin, I want to briefly describe what that means. Racial equity refers to any outcome which is sort of impacted by the color of your skin. So we're going to specifically speak about that in Hong Kong, but we'll also be speaking about the comparison and contrast to the West. Um, I have three amazing speakers today that will sort of go through the topic with us. Um, Very firstly on stage, I want to bring onto stage Jeffrey Andrews. He was the city's first ever ethnic minority social worker. Following that, I want to bring up the CEO and co-founder of the African Center Hong Kong, Innocent Mutuanga. And last but not certainly not least, SCMP reporter Catherine Giordano. All right. So this is going to be about an hour-long panel discussion. We'll have a quick 15 to 20-minute Q&A after that. So my first question to actually all of our speakers today, we'll start with Jeffrey. When I asked the question, does racial equity exist? And if so, to what extent? What would your response be to that?
Well, if you're talking about Hong Kong, I would say it's still a challenge. I think just this week I had a horrible experience. I brought one of my African clients to rent a place in To Kwon Wan. I called the lady up beforehand. I spoke in my, fluent Cantonese, and as I entered the shop, she used her broom to stop me and say, "我哋唔租俾你嚟嘅喎，我哋唔租㗎，冇地方住." I was just like, my gosh, I haven't even started my conversation, and she just said already very simply,個業主唔租俾印度人. And I was like, oh my gosh, forget Indian. I mean, I was going to bring it from my African client. Like, forget about that question now. So, yeah, it's still a challenging thing that we're going through in Hong Kong.
Anderson, why don't you go next?
Just before I answer the question, I just want to kind of appreciate that you guys have come here. Thanks everybody for coming over. For me particularly, I think it's special because when I came to Hong Kong, Jeff was my caseworker, my case officer. That's the name, right? Yeah. So he was my case officer. So I knew Jeff from day one I came to Hong Kong. And he, wrote that nice little card for me to go and get some food. Which is kind of interesting. And then the other interesting thing as well is that the last time we had a panel discussion together with Jeff, I think that was like 11 years ago or something. That was in Lisa's class. She's a Professor Lingnan. And we haven't been able to have a panel discussion ever since, then. The timetables. So it's really great for us to be here. So I'm really excited.
Thanks, Jay.
Yeah, so this guy he does some really amazing work. But onto the point that whether racial equity exists in a Hong Kong context, the answer, of course, which you probably all agree on, is no. So my experience, I think Jeff also kind of alluded some of that, is that it's largely, I could describe it in two words. Two words as an African or black person in Hong Kong. One is cautiousness, and the other one is curiosity. So people tend to be a little bit more cautious. Renting houses is another issue. Sharing spaces, MTRs, and etc. Those are the other issues as well. But people also are curious. Sometimes they want to come and, of course it can be offensive. They want to come and grab my hair and feel it. But sometimes people ask me, the most common question is like, "Hey, Innocent, why your hand here so black and here so white?" So that's a very common one. That's partly curiosity. It can come with offensive. So that's kind of been like my experience. But definitely, there's still some way to go.
Yes, to echo what the other two have said, no, we are still, I think, working towards it. And, in Hong Kong, I believe I'm not sure if you mentioned this, but like there's 300,000, or sorry, no, 620,000 ethnic minorities in Hong Kong, which accounts for around 8%. That's, I think, quite significant of the population. And a lot of these people are like domestic helpers from Indonesia and the Philippines. And another like large subset would be like Indians, South Asians, and seeing how these people are, like stories of how people are treated, especially I think during like the pandemic, you know, we heard so many terrible stories of like such as domestic helpers being like thrown out of their homes, made to sleep in the stairwell, which should not happen. It's quite a horrific thing. Just this past weekend, so I was going on a tour for a story that I'm writing about Ramadan, and the tour was through Foundation for Shared Impact, and it was to highlight Ramadan, educate the people in the tour group, and also to show us some ethnically diverse entrepreneurs in Mirador Mansion and Chungking Mansion, and like help get more foot traffic there. And I think it's just some of these things are not talked about. Like during Ramadan, a lot of these restaurants that are owned by Muslims, they don't get customers during like lunchtime because people are fasting. Like how can we help combat something like this? And then I also spoke to a student who is born and raised in Hong Kong. He's Pakistani and practicing Muslim, and talking about like he's so grateful that HKU has a prayer room. But you know, for other students during Ramadan, like not every school has a prayer room. Not every school is going to offer halal food. So these sorts of things, I think, may be overlooked, and they're not thought about. And I think with hopefully more education and exposure, we can slowly start to help these students and these members of society.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna come to Innocent first because I think your journey is extremely fascinating. The way that you came to Hong Kong and the sort of struggles that you didn't let like get hit to you, and like you overcame them. Could you briefly speak to our audience about your journey to Hong Kong, why you came here? Just for everyone's reference, he's an asylum seeker, or sorry, he was an asylum seeker. Maybe speak to a bit about your initial journey into Hong Kong.
Okay, so I'm from Zimbabwe. You know, I kind of alluded to the, you know, like the first time I came, you know, Jeff gave me a card and, you know, showed me where to eat food. You know, because the first time I came, I went to Chongqing Mansions, which is where the Center for Refugees is. So when I, you know, when I came to Hong Kong, I mean, it was rough. It was very rough. You know, it's Hong Kong. It's a very rough city. You know, so if it was in Zimbabwe, you know, you walk in, you know, people be like, oh, you know, be like, oh, you know, let's see, come to my house. We take care of you for now. Nobody here was gonna say, come to my house in Hong Kong. So you're gonna have to sleep outside a little bit, you know, and sleep rough outside, you know, which is very common. I mean, now it's getting better. I think the organization, I think they, you know, they seem to be reaching out to close a lot of those gaps. So when I came here, you know, I think a lot of people usually ask, like, why Hong Kong? I mean, for me, really, there was one main reason, which was, you know, some of you may not expect it, but it was actually Jackie Chan. Which is the reason why I came to Hong Kong. And then, you know, so when I came here, and then, you know, people were like, oh, so, you know, why did you choose Hong Kong? You know, Jackie Chan. And then people were like, no, we don't like him. You know, so, which was, I was like, I don't care. I love Jackie Chan. You know, so, you know, so once I came, you know, I was homeless for a bit, and, you know, trying to, you know, to survive. You know, and then I ended up, you know, realizing that by looking back into my life, I think education has always been the key to my next step. So I decided, like, look, I think the only solution I know to everything is education. So that's the way I'm gonna try to resolve my own issues here. So that's when I started to try to go into university. At that point, was not something that was heard of. But I started to pursue university, and then I ended up studying at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. I don't know if anybody went to see UHK here. Nobody? Oh my goodness, we need to fix this. That's the best university in Hong Kong. Yes. Somebody's like, no. Yeah. So I ended up studying anthropology there. And then just to wrap this up. And then now I founded the Africa Center Hong Kong, which is an organization dedicated to rebranding blackness, challenging the notions around being black or anything African. In addition, I was talking to somebody, they were like, oh, how do you do all that stuff? In addition, I am also working for an investment bank. So I do banking, so that's what I just came from. So those are the two things. I think I need to add one more achievement now. I think I keep living that. And then I also got married to a Japanese wife. That's an achievement.
Catherine, my first question after the racial equity one was, as someone that came from the States, what was your initial impression or thoughts on the non-Chinese population in Hong Kong?
Right, so for my story, I moved to Hong Kong during the pandemic, which I'm sure was a strange decision coming here during quite a chaotic time. But I grew up in Boston. I went to university in Boston, and I'm very grateful to be exposed to a lot of different people with different backgrounds, because I was involved in a lot of different culture groups at my school because I was studying international relations as a minor. So I wanted to see more of the world, and so I moved to Hong Kong in 2021. Moved back to the States for a while, and then I moved back again in 2023. It was quite a zigzag to get here. But when I first moved here, I mean, a lot of this was just it felt quite normal for me to like look around the street and see people with different skin tones and with different backgrounds, people maybe wearing like hijabs and such. Like for me, coming from America, that feels quite normal. And I made lots of different friends. And then over time, especially during the pandemic, I noticed just anecdotally from my friends that sometimes, they're having issues that I cannot relate to be honest. Like a lot of my friends, I have a lot of South Asian friends have told me the amount of times they've been stopped by the police to check their Hong Kong ID in over 2 years. That's never happened to me. And just telling me like how they've had like people be rude to them at like, hair salons or, other different places. So over time, I slowly started to realize, because at the time I wasn't actually working as a reporter, so I wasn't necessarily inundated with the news all the time. But over time, I started to realize how like deep-seated some of these stereotypes are and how it is affecting people in small ways and big ways day to day. And this is not something that, obviously I'm not Chinese, but I still don't really see the effects of it on myself on a personal day-to-day. But through my friends, it's quite upsetting to see my friends going through some of these things. And now I'm very grateful to be writing stories to hopefully amplify these voices and do as much as I can to dismantle some of these stereotypes. So yeah.
And Jeff, Catherine sort of touched on this, the discrimination that her South Asian friends face.
Yeah.
As someone that was born and raised in Hong Kong, what are some of the everyday challenges that you can sort of speak to our audience as an example of this?
Well, I mean, the reality is, when I married my wife, she's Filipino, she's right there. She never believed me when I said, hey, I get stopped and searched all the time. She's like, nah, it doesn't happen. And lo and behold, one day as we got down our building in To Kwa Wan, the cops stopped both of us. And she's like, you were right, and she got excited about it. But I said, this is, when I see an officer, I get my ID ready because I know they're going to stop me. And I know the only way I can ease tensions is when I speak Cantonese. And then they go, okay. Then it kind of calms down. But it happens to many of my friends still today. If I go to a shop, I can guarantee you there's someone always kind of watching. If I'm in an MTR, someone's holding their bag tight. So these are kind of the passive aggressiveness that many of our communities go through on a daily basis. And I think, sadly, if you look at media, a lot of the news, if it's a crime that's happened, it's always South Asians, and then they go into explicitly their, where they're from, what their status is. And I don't see that with any other incidents. If there's for example, an expat doing something in Lang Kwai Fong, that's not told. They don't go into the ethnicity or race. But if it's a South Asian, you see that in local newspaper. There's some prominent ones that put us up every day and even put down statistics of the crimes that we commit. And you think, wow, this is the kind of stereotypes that happen. So when you go out in the public and have engagement with local kids, they always say, Lady Dian, so it's always your people. What do you have to say for your people? And I think a few weeks ago we had some university kids come to Chungking Mansions, and he was talking to me and he was saying to me, your people always in Sham Shui Po look very scary. And I'm like, okay, wait, who's your people? So he had to say, dark-skinned, and I think that kind of stereotypes keeps coming into play when it's the South Asians, and now a lot of, we got a lot of Africans in Hong Kong now, so it's a real tough one that we have to keep battling.
And Catherine, I guess this sort of question flows quite well because Jeff mentioned the media portrayal of certain publications. Was that one of your aims, perhaps, to sort of, when you first came to Hong Kong from Boston, you wanted to sort of clarify, debunk some of those myths? Or what was your, I guess, aim, if there was one?
Yeah, I guess with the nature of some of the stories that I cover, it does inherently debunk these things, or at the very least, highlight some inequities going on. So I do a lot of stories. I cover a variety of topics, but I do focus sometimes on underserved communities and ethnic minorities through a variety of lenses. So one of my favorite stories that I wrote was about why we need more ethnic minority lawyers in Hong Kong. A lot of, because we have such a large ethnic minority population, and sometimes, people may want to apply for a Hong Kong passport or something. Having someone who can speak their language, make them feel more comfortable, and who can understand the cultural context of the process can make the person feel more at ease, make the process smoother. But there are a lot of barriers to ethnic minorities becoming lawyers. I spoke to one young woman who talked about how difficult it is because law firms want people who are fluent in Mandarin and fluent in Cantonese. And just with the system, like the way the system is with schools, that's very difficult for a lot of people to do because the Chinese students are segregated from the ethnic minorities in Cantonese classes. And that trickles out into other aspects. I spoke to the same young woman, and she said, it made us not really interact outside of the class. And they weren't able to, they were just taught Cantonese to pass their exams, pretty much. That's not going to help them for life after school. They might need these language skills, particularly if you want to become a lawyer. So, I think as it's progressed, I've hoped that I've been able to highlight some of these ways which young people, students, and as people are starting their careers just have such obstacles to overcome just by their background.
And Innocent, when it comes to asylum seekers, what are some of the stereotypes you've seen? Because you've been someone that's received a lot of media coverage because of how incredible your journey is. Innocent didn't really touch on this, but he went, I think you were initially sort of stopped at the immigration, and they basically said oh, you must be going to Chungking Mansions and so forth. And he was initially sleeping on park benches. Now he works at at an American investment bank as an associate. As someone that's sort of seen such an incredible journey, how has the media portrayal been for you and for the wider asylum seeker community?
Yeah, the fact that when I started the Africa Center, we said we're going to rebrand blackness. And the main reason why blackness is perceived the way it has been perceived is the media. It comes in different forms. And, so we like to, during the summer when we have interns at Africa Center, we like to have them do a sentiment check. Where are the people right now in their feeling of blackness? They talk to people, but we say, go also on the internet, for example, and dig in, find all the keywords and how are people talking about blackness. Of course, if you look 10 years, I've been here almost 12 years. I didn't mention that. I'm going to 12 years. When I came in here, it was nasty. It was bad. Like journalists, Jeff already touched on, they just write all kind of things, and then they get into detail. And in most cases, the detail is wrong. It's about like, oh, there's this guy from Africa who did this, and then they start imagining things, just like ChatGPT if you don't ask the right questions. They start just hallucinating about the entire background of that person. But the funny thing is we know the person. I'm like, oh my goodness, how can anybody guess something so wrong? So that was, and then at that point, I would try to write them to the media. I'm like, hey, that's just so wrong. This is not correct. I know the person, but a lot of that wasn't helping. I was like, I think we need to be more strategic. We needed to be more strategic. Therefore, we need to get into schools. We need to adjust curriculums. I was talking to somebody else earlier, like, I kind of like change. I know in Hong Kong, some people complain that some of the curriculum is being changed. But for me as an African, very good opportunity. That's the time we're like, oh, you're changing curriculum, good time. Let's see what is in the books first. And let's adjust that. Okay, I'm like, oh, you have not been reading some African literatures and stuff. Okay, let's put in some of that. If you have any, some, kids who are writing like DSE, I think last year, a lot of kids were complaining like, oh my goodness, if I fail this DSE, it's because of Michelle Obama. I'm like, what do you mean because of Michelle Obama? They were like, oh, it's because there was a Michelle Obama text in the examination. I'm like, yeah, we are not playing. We are coming for more, putting in all that stuff. So we needed to be a little more strategic. So going back to the idea around the refugee side, because racial experience in Hong Kong comes also, it intersects with class. So when a person sees a refugee, you can't really tell sometimes you're a refugee. But if they see me, they don't see a dollar sign on my forehead, but if they see some of the guaylos, they're like, dollar sign, So for me, I don't get the benefit of the doubt. It's always funny because I remember when I was going for barbecue, sometimes we barbecue, barbecue Hong Kong style, we barbecue, and then at the end we're trying to make everybody pay whatever fraction of the money. And then after we finish eating, one of my friends is from Iran. He's like, let's have this investment banker pay. He's got a lot of money. And then the other was the good thing about me is because I can take any identity, I can go in as a banker, I could go in as a refugee, I can go in as an African, I can go in as, I could go in as a former homeless person, and then I can see how people treat me. And it's fascinating. As an anthropologist, it's all fascinating to see how people do that. So I remember when we're barbecuing, and there's, when you're barbecuing, Hong Kong style, you have these wires, you put the meat onto the wires, and then somebody's barbecuing, you barbecue. If you're doing meatballs, you got 3 here, you distribute them. But I don't necessarily look like a target for young ladies at that point, and so they were not giving me that. I'm like, I'm liking this. They're not giving me that. And then when this Iranian friend said, he's the banker, then I saw, the ladies are trying to give me stuff now. I'm like, it seems like now my status has miraculously gone up. But, you see that. So my treatment, if I'm in the Yuen Long district, where you could find a lot of the Africans and other minority communities, not so nice. People treat us like trash. But if I'm in Central, going back to the idea of class, people assume like, this guy might be Auchini, you never know. Then the treatment also get better. Also, the police experience is also the same as well. If they think I'm rich, they treat me different. So if you are a refugee, you're doomed. Like nobody wants you. The girls don't want you. They run away like flies. And the police like you. They're coming after you. So you'd see those kind of things as well. Mm-hmm.
So as a freelance journalist, one of, I think, the most disheartening recent pieces of news that I read was about Hong Kong Unison, a non-profit organization that served ethnic minorities for over 20 years, had decided to disband. Jeffrey, I'm going to come to you since you've been in Hong Kong for the longest time. What was your initial reaction to this piece of news, and what did you make of the reasoning that their mission was complete?
Well, Unison saved my life when I was a young 18-year-old arrested. I was a delinquent youth, and Fermi Wong, who started Unison, came and bailed me out when no one else would. And I'm so grateful for her and Unison because they're the ones who paved the way and fought for so many of us. Actually, they fought for me to become the first ethnic minority social worker because at that time, no schools were taking ethnic minorities in the social work program because you needed to read and write to be a social worker. Can you believe this? Even to serve our community. But they were the ones who pushed a community college, and thanks to them, I was one of the first. Just yesterday, Innocent, you were there, some of you were there. I'm so proud to say that I'm no longer just the first. There's now over 90 ethnically diverse registered social workers. How incredible. So it's grateful to Unison because I mean, yes, it's a bittersweet moment. I think it was inevitable. Unison was always about fighting rights, and you guys know what kind of climate we're in right now. So I would say mission complete in a lot of aspects. I think maybe it's time for the rest of us to take on that mantle. And I think you look at this group here, what we're doing, and many of you who are sitting down there. So yeah, I'd say I'm grateful for what Unison has paved the way for many of us at that time. So many delinquent youths and many of us who weren't given second chances in life. Unison took us upon, and gave us a new lease of life.
And Innocent, was Unison an organization that you sort of interacted with, and what was your reaction to that piece of news?
I think from our side, we will mostly review their research. They used to publish research, which I think was very, very helpful to understand the status of, of the community. But I think, to Jeff's point, I think, this is a chance for some people to take over to in different directions and be more specific in the mission. I think it's the mentors, they're fallen on the ground. I think it's an opportunity also for especially people within the ethnically diverse communities to pick up and really address these situations that affect us. So, I mean, I would love if they had continued, but look, I mean, it's an opportunity at the end of the day. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on that.
And Catherine, as a fellow journalist yourself, what was your reaction? I think SCMP were one of the first on the story, so.
Yeah, the SMP did cover this. I was surprised, I think. I mean, I don't know, I guess I didn't see it coming. And like Innocent said, it would be nice if they did continue because they have done so much wonderful work for the community. And I hope that people can use this as a way to motivate themselves inwardly. I mean, mission accomplished. I think that's quite a broad, sweeping statement, and I hope that when I think about this, I kind of relate it to what the former executive of the NGO. I think his name is John Say. He said oh really? Wonderful. Yeah, I think he mentioned how according to the SCMP, he said it's like a hospital closing with still more saying they've cured the patients, right? And when I heard this, it made me think about something in unprecedented times, such as, for my perspective in America, I was in America for part of the COVID-19 pandemic. When that happened, we saw so much unprecedented violence towards Asian people, which hadn't really happened previously. So, as things come by that we don't expect, hopefully we can have the tools to combat it, because no matter what, things will keep changing, and we have to stay strong together in situations like that.
And I guess speaking on similar themes, could you perhaps describe, we'll start with Innocent, why don't we start with Innocent? Could you perhaps tell us what that sort of move perhaps tells us about the future of not only the ethnic minority community, but underserved communities in general?
The move
by Unison, yeah.
They told me the former executive director is here. Now I have to okay. I think, they made a point that I think in the past, I was just reading some of that stuff. I think they made a point that in the past, maybe the government wasn't doing as much. I think Jeff already mentioned earlier that, especially in the education, also those are some of the gaps that were there. But now it's, I think the government has started this ethnic minority, what is that, some kind of like care teams, they've launched the ethnic minority care teams, which I think, a great step, to also address that. I mean, there'll always be gaps, I can't really, speak from their perspective at Unison, but at least from this side, I feel like, the government is doing more, definitely, compared to last time. So that means the issues of the ethnic minorities or ethnically diverse communities, I think, are slowly becoming, center stage, like something more important that actually every other person can look into. I think, right now I see some of the representatives also from government as well. They come to the Africa Center as well, trying to interact with the African community. The only people who interacted with who were Chinese before were either the police, or social workers. And sometimes the social workers, if they are coming from, they're either coming from severely underfunded NGOs, and then there'll be the ones coming, they can only empathize, but they can't do much, But now I feel like there is a little bit more in terms of efforts to try to interact with the ethnically diverse communities, and it's trying to also find our value and add kind of like the value into the community as well. So I think it's in some way, I think it tells the story that I think as an ethnic diverse person, I think it's an opportunity for us. I think these are chances and opportunities that we can also be at the center instead of becoming the anomaly.
And Catherine, are you hopeful, perhaps, of what this could hold for the community, or do you think it's sort of a step in the wrong direction?
I mean, it's hard to say like what will happen in the future. I mean, no matter what, again, like I said, it would be nice if it continued, but we can't just like lie down and say, well, what are we supposed to do now, right? I think people need to advocate for themselves and advocate for each other and be allies as well. So regardless of what I think no matter what, we still have to still work together to try to solve issues and problems as they continue to arise.
Yeah, and Jeff, any final thoughts on that topic?
No, absolutely. I mean, like I said, now we have the first social workers, first firemen, first policemen now. Unison has paved the way for a lot of that, and I think now there are several other NGOs, more prominent community leaders. We have 2 district councillors who are ethnically diverse. So I do think that we're breaking into the mainstream more and more by the day. Can there be more done? Absolutely. And I think I really agree with Catherine. We do need more allies. This is something I feel in Hong Kong we lack, is this pedestrian attitude. When it doesn't bother me, I'm just going to go ahead in my way. And I think I'm seeing more younger local Hong Kongers have more empathy for refugee issues and ethnic minority issues than ever before. I have a bad habit of, whenever I see an article on ethnic minorities, I like to read the comment section, and it's always like all these trolls. But I must say, recently, in the last 2 years, I've seen more people stand up for us. I say, no, that's not how it should be, and I think that's Hong Kong for you. And I see a lot of great, fantastic examples of everyday champions. You guys remember the quarantine site back then in Fotan? I'll tell you a horrible incident when the first meals that were provided to the Muslim community who were fasting, believe it or not, was ham and cucumber sandwich. And I was shocked. I said, wow, this is provided, at that time by unbelievable. But I tell you, today, or when I go to a cha chan tang and there's this waitress who's an older lady in her 50s or 60s, and I say, well, I was like a cha siu fan, which is pork rice, and she'll tell me, wait, right, which means you can't have that. And I'm like, wow, how can someone from like this background get it now, then when a whole entity cannot even figure that out? So I feel more hopeful now than ever before that more grassroots, there's more empathy, there's more community. I see that as a social worker every day. People are coming into Chungking Mansions than ever before. 15 years ago, no one wants to come inside. Now there are students walking in, bringing their families and their children, local Hong Kongers who've never stepped foot in there, and they're understanding the race, the cultures, and the beautiful diversity that Hong Kong offers. So yes, I think grateful to Unison opening up a lot of ways, opening up a lot of champions on the grounds. Younger generations are now taking up that mantle at different ways of influencing society.
Moving away from the unison topic, Catherine, I think one of the most pressing questions I had for you was that since you're from the States, how would you say are there any similarities between how ethnic minorities and minority communities in general are covered in the States to Hong Kong? It's often said that there's more awareness in the States. Could you speak about that?
Yeah, that's tough. So the media and the news in the States is painfully divisive, to the point where sometimes I feel like I don't know what I'm reading, and like how people have twisted things. From what I personally consume more often, I would say the news outlets that I follow do a pretty good job of either featuring things that show representation, or like explainers or something to highlight voices that might be struggling with new policies that are happening. Yeah, I think it really depends on where you get your news, because what one news agency might say can be twisted so much, and like the angle of the story can become so different from another news agency. And I think it really speaks to how news agencies work, because there's a lot of subtle ways that there can be stereotyping, or subtle ways to influence the way you think. It's not necessarily just like what it's written in the paper or what the reporter or the anchor says. It's also what they choose to cover, what they don't choose to cover, what photos they use and what photos they don't use, what quotes are cherry-picked. So, for example, I'm a Gen Z, so sometimes I look at Instagram, and I saw a post from the New York Times about Kumbh Mela, which was like a very large Hindu pilgrimage and religious celebration. And I was looking at the photos that they used, and they were quite unattractive photos. And I know that they had a photojournalist there who could have taken beautiful shots, and but they used photos with lots of trash, and it looked quite dirty, and people in the comments were just tearing them apart. Some people were saying, oh, this looks like awful, and etc. And some people were calling the New York Times out for the photos that they used, saying, oh, you didn't represent this well. You know, this is a very sacred celebration. And I like to see how people comment about these things. I think it's really fascinating. That's why I like to go on things like Instagram or like Twitter, X, to see what people are saying about it, even though some of it can be trolls and bots. But you get to see like how people are thinking, and I'm glad that people are trying to think more critically. But again, these are subtle ways that we can make us think differently. So I think it's really tough to say, and it really depends on where you get your news. But there are so many ways that people can influence you, whether they mean to or not.
And Jeff, I mean, you sort of touched on this in one of your previous answers, but you sort of mentioned that today's ethnic minorities, they're very different. They want to sort of explore different avenues. What are some of the biggest differences that you see between today's generation and the generation that you grew up in?
Like I said, I think back then we had segregated schools. You know, I never studied with someone that was from a Chinese background until I went way into my social work program. And that was so sad of the realities that, you know, we always thought society was two worlds, ethnic minorities and local Chinese. I'm very lucky I picked up my Cantonese playing football, but I have friends who studied from kindergarten until secondary school, still can't speak, you know, Cantonese, and that's such a shame for a city like Hong Kong. We call it, you know, Asia's world city, and that kind of segregation is sad. But today I'm very proud. There are, like I said, you know, after 97, many of us wanted to be policemen, but we couldn't be policemen because they put the language requirement that you need to read and write Cantonese. Even to be a fireman, you needed to read and write Cantonese. The irony. So I'm grateful now, again, that was, I think, Unison pushing the way forward for kind of lower requirement for Cantonese in the police testing, and I'm grateful. I think I spoke to one of the police officer contacts that we have, and he told me there's now over 55 ethnically diverse police officers. How awesome is that? Instead of back then when we had to choose gangs but now they're policemen. So I think we're seeing more of that now. One of the things that we're doing is this museum, and in there we're having a thing called the Pillars of the Community, and we have doctors, bus drivers, nurses. I mean, I couldn't even imagine these careers when I was in school, but I'm so proud now we're again pushing those boundaries.
And Innocent, you're sort of, when it comes to asylum seekers, I think it's such a wide-ranging population, right? You have people from Africa, you have Asians that come here, people from all over the planet come here. So when it comes to that part of the population, what's your advice as someone that sort of made it? Do you feel a sense of responsibility? And perhaps you can also speak a bit about the Africa Center and the work that you do over there. Do you feel a sense of responsibility that you have to help these people, or do you sort of just go with the flow and see how things can sort of gain momentum?
Wow, responsibility. I can't say it's it's kind of like it was responsibility or like obligation, because it's like this is my community. So, as people who are part of my community, no matter maybe I become whatever job that I could do. The people, it's not like I've dramatically moved. These are not my friends. I was just talking about my Iranian friend. He's still an asylum seeker, but we're still very good friends. So it's so when I'm doing what I do within the refugee community, which I think, by the way, I think Jeff should be able to speak more to this, because I think he does a lot of work in that space. What I do in terms of the refugee or asylum seeker community, I do it because I'm part of the community. Like I'm never out of it. Like I'm still part of the community. What impacts them also, I feel like impacts me as well. I think I'm from the south of the continent in Africa, and we have a word there we call Ubuntu, which means I am because you are. We kind of recognize this idea that we are all interlinked and tied up together. So if I think I have made it, but somebody else hasn't made it, it means we all haven't made it anything. So in some way, that gives me the obligation or something, the thought and the belief that I need to also work together and see where we can get to. I know we're not going to be 100% where we're going to get someplace, but we keep trying. I think what I've been doing mostly, at least within what I love to do more, what I've been doing mostly has been among the youth who are trying to get into university. So, I mean, for some, just seeing me and hearing my story, they were like, oh, I heard your story on the TV, and that's when I realized I can actually go to university. Some of them are like, oh, I didn't know I could go to university. Could you imagine if you are in a high school and you don't think there is anywhere you're going to get to? You don't probably, the motivation to start is very low. And then, because they've heard the story that somebody actually did it, and then their hopes go high. And then they're, oh my goodness, I can actually do that. So some of the kids, they come in and they're like, oh, please mentor me, help me. What can I do? These are my struggles, but they feel like you can speak to their struggles as well. So we even launched an initiative at the Africa Center called Dream Launch Achievers Program. So this one is primarily, working with the youth, good number of those are refugees, and trying to offer them scholarships. They go to study, try to talk to universities, and so that they can actually look at qualifications more holistically. Because sometimes going back to some Jeff's points is sometimes people just look like maths are 4, if you're not familiar, Chinese 2, this number, so these are like grades, and then people like, the Hong Kong system sometimes can be very bureaucratic in the sense that just, okay, off. But I have to actually go in and talk to the admissions office. I'm like, no, I know you have rejected this kid. Let's give him another chance to do the interview. Let him show up and talk to him, and then you're gonna realize that you're missing out a lot. So these are some of the things I do more of, within the refugee community. And I think, when I joined, I was probably one of the first, and then another friend from Rwanda, and then now I don't know. Maybe Jeff might have statistics on how many are actually going to university.
16 refugees. 16.
So that's kind of a lot more now.
And Jeff, you briefly spoke about the diversity hub. I I was sort of wondering what the thought process was behind creating this, because this is essentially a museum and a community space, from what I understand. Could you speak about why you decided to sort of open up a museum of sorts, and what your perhaps long-term goal is with this project?
Well, I didn't open it, and it's the organization that I work for. It's Christian Action, and again, really, growing up as a kid, I realized our contributions in Hong Kong are not told in textbooks. So when I went to school, a lot of the local kids who would be in a different class would go, "Why are you guys here? Why don't you go back home? Hong Kong is not your home." And then lo and behold, again, I realized we've done a lot of history, and South Asians, ethnic minorities, were in Hong Kong in the inceptions. Anyone know when our first recorded history in Hong Kong was? Thank you so much. Round of applause to him. Thank you. 1840, right. So I thought, why is that not in textbooks? Why is that not told in the media? Why aren't people, talking about our contributions and stuff like that? So anyway, again, for everything you need money. But I'm very grateful in Chongqing. We have some amazing people. And a Sikh gentleman who owns a flat next door to our refugee center said, during the pandemic, he saw we were struggling with space, and he said, just use the space. It's very run down as a makeshift storage space. We were using it for 2 years, and then this professor from HKU came up and saw the space and said, "Oh, Jeff, what is the space?" And I said, it's a makeshift storage space. He said, "Hey, I've got $1 million in university money to help you renovate." And I kid you not, we went down to Uncle Seti and we said, "Hey, can we make this into a community space?" And he gave us the key for 2 years, free. I mean, if you guys know anyone else with that kind of space, please look for me. Because it's just awesome. And all he said was one thing when he handed over the key. He says, just make sure that you continue to welcome people of all faiths, which what we're doing. And then today, we've got these two designers who built all the HSBC archives, and they saw what we're doing, and we said, now we want to not just make it into a community space, we want to make it into a museum, a cultural space, and we're also doing a youth training center. So on top of the cultural museum space, which we're building right now, and we're supposed to open on Friday. I'm still praying, I'm panicking right now because it's still being built as we speak. But we're training youth, so every 4 months we're going to be training 16 ethnically diverse youth. We just finished our first cohort. But I can tell you, every time we tell them the museum concept, not many people buy it, but as soon as you see it being built and you see your community's contributions into Hong Kong, from the Star Ferry to HKU to the first business account from HSBC was actually an ethnic minority family, a Muslim family, and guess what? They still use that account. You can see immense pride from our young youth saying, actually, this is our home too, that sense of belonging and that self-esteem. So I'm really excited. So it's not just an ethnic minority museum and cultural space. We also thought we should pay tribute to Chongqing Mansions, so a bit of Chongqing history. Later on, I think I've shown you a really cool picture of Chongqing before it was Chongqing Mansions. I kid you not many people have seen it. And we're also going to be displaying some of those things in there. So I'm really grateful for all the people that just believe in this dream. As a kid, I always thought a museum would be so cool, because after I went to DC, I saw they have so many cool museums. The African History Museum, I've been to both Detroit and DC. I went to the Jewish Museum. I went to the Jim Crow Museum, and I thought, wow, so much respect is given to history, but in Hong Kong we don't have that. Even the Heritage Museum does not have much about the South Asian, the ethnic minority community. So in our timeline, not only are we including Indian, Nepalese, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, but we're also putting the Thai community, domestic migrant workers, and refugees. We want to pay respect to everyone that's played a part in Hong Kong.
So I just checked the clock. We have about 10 more minutes before we open up to Q&A. So I want to ask this. I feel like Trump has to come up at some point. So these buzzwords, Trump, DEI, and sort of his presidency across the 2 terms, do you sense that we're in a, not in just in America, but, and I guess I can start with Innocent, but
Go ahead.
but from DEI, do you think we're heading in a direction where diversity, equity, or inclusion, those concepts are going by the wayside, or do you think eventually once normalcy will eventually prevail after a few years?
Okay, it's me first. Okay, it's funny because clients at work they all talk about Trump. I'm like, oh, Trump, not Trump again. But I think I see things in a more cyclical way. I think more like cycles. I grew up taking care of cows and goats. And if there's anything I know is cycles, seasons. They are more real there. It's more raw and stuff like that. In 2020, when the George Floyd incident happened, I think the pendulum moved right at the other end, when it comes to people's conversations around diversity, inclusion, equity. That definitely was not sustainable. If it was like that far end where it was. And as expected, I see this backlash, on the back of that, trying to swing the pendulum the other direction, at some point, I don't think this is going to last. This in the wrong direction that it's going right now. I don't think that's going to last. I think it's at some point, the pendulum is going to come back nice and position itself where it's supposed to be. So, I'm still, I was talking to Kathleen earlier, I'm an eternal optimist. So I still believe that there is still going to be good times ahead. This universe, I don't think it's going to allow so much craziness for a long time. So it's gonna come back at some point, and then need to position itself in a place where it's going to be long-term and sustainable. This is the conversation around diversity and equity didn't start yesterday. These are things people have been talking pre-slavery, a lot of that. So there's been a lot of people who have, some have died, some have, to get to where we are right now. And I don't think one crazy man can take things or two crazy men, can take things and move them in the wrong direction in overnight. I think soon it will stabilize.
Yeah, I think I agree with Innocent. I think, I feel America is such a resilient, resistant society, and especially civil society is so strong and vociferous, and I think it's such beautiful diversity that they actually don't realize how much they influence the rest of the world. And I think, we're encouraged because of the work that they've done, the things that they push. When I went to the U.S., I'm so grateful that the State Department took me on a trip, and I met James Meredith. I don't know if you guys know who James Meredith. He's the first black man to be allowed to study in old Mississippi. And he told us his story. He said, man, I had to fight 3 or 4 times. I had to go all the way to the Supreme Court. And even then, they refused entry. The state governor refused entry into the university. And finally, President JFK got so pissed off, he sent 20,000 troops with him. And even then, apparently, there were riots, people dying because they didn't want this black man to study in his university. But he persevered, and JFK persevered, and eventually, for 4 years, he had to have 4 security guards with him throughout his study. And today, there's a statue of him in that university. So I think that's America for you, right? It's just this beautiful resistance that the common man, it works, civil society works, and the justice system, hopefully in the long term, will prevail, that one man cannot dictate everything. And I think it's the people for the people. So I think that's for me. Like Innocent, I'm an optimist.
And Catherine, as someone that's from America, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'm so exhausted hearing his name and reading his name everywhere. It's like, oh my gosh. And it is strange for me being halfway across the world and seeing these policies and all these, how everything is unfolding. And it could directly affect friends and family members of mine. It's quite strange to be all the way over here seeing everything happen. I want to echo what Innocent said. I guess recently the way the states are working is, one politician will be elected, he'll, policies, and then 4 years later, the other side will be elected and he'll undo everything. And then, it just keeps going back and forth. But it is, for me, quite concerning seeing how things are unfolding. Like getting rid of DEI for like this merit-based opportunity system. Like, if you have some white boy who went to Stanford, who has connections from his father and has a lot of internship opportunities, he's gonna be fine. He's gonna get a job somehow. and yet taking away opportunities from somebody who, like, to them, this job means probably a lot more. Maybe they're first generation college student or graduate, maybe they don't have the financial means. Maybe this job means a lot more. It's quite upsetting, I think, and I get so frustrated whenever I think about it and I read. I hate having like being inundated with the news with my job and seeing all these things. Like every day there's something new happening, and I'm like, oh, when is it going to settle down? And especially because America, like, there can be like a ripple effect. It's such an influential power, and I worry to see like how this could affect other countries and policies across the globe.
And the final question for me, for all of our speakers today, it might seem a bit generic, but for I'll start with Jeff this time. For the ethnic minority community, given that everything that's happened across the last few years, what's your realistic ambition for them? Would you like more representation in the government, more emphasis in terms of their contributions and textbooks? What's the tangible difference that you would like to see?
I think you answered one of them. I think in government, it's important to have that political voice. It's great to have 2 district councillors, but I think we do need a LegCo member. Many years ago, not a big fan of Regina Ip, but she did say if she was going to be elected, she wanted to create a commission on ethnic affairs, and I think I thought was a great, initiative, and I think we do need that. Till today, many ethnic minorities are still marginalized. We still have many issues. We can't rely on the Equal Opportunities Commission to take cases up. So I think this is a critical step. And I think, again, it's important that textbooks, schools have this change in learning about cultural sensitivity before, there's, now they put so much emphasis on national, education and all that. But I think cultural sensitivity is important. Till today, I can't imagine why local kids cannot understand a Muslim needs to fast. They need to pray 5 times a day. Why do they still say, oh, ma'afan? But they don't understand the sensitivities. When I see when an ethnic minority kid come to me and still tell me someone teased him because he has a turban and they called him chasiu bao, and I thought, how in 2025, we still have these issues? And I think that needs to be from the education system. Am I optimistic? Absolutely. Again, many young people are making a voice for themselves. Many allies, many schools are starting to come and be coming out of their classrooms, coming and meeting Africa Center. I think you guys are doing a great job, and to us in Christian Action. And that's why I think things like the Diversity Hub hopefully can be that pivot in transforming from the grassroots. I used to believe from the top-down approach, but now I really hope that we start from the ground and hopefully everyone meets halfway.
And Catherine, I'll come to you second. What would you like to see change when it comes to the media landscape and covering that community? It seems that there are always fewer and fewer media outlets. So what would you like to see, like a tangible difference?
Yeah, I think it honestly starts with the newsroom itself. I'm very grateful that the SCMP is quite a diverse newsroom, I would say, for Hong Kong. But for example, maybe a local paper that's in Cantonese, maybe they don't have as much. Maybe all of the reporters and editors are local Chinese people. So they may not have this perspective, or this, they may not have as many opportunities to talk to ethnically diverse communities, or maybe it just won't come up on their minds as much. So I think it really starts with the newsroom itself in getting more voices and more representation, and hopefully that can trickle out to the news itself. And then for my own position, I work with Young Post, and specifically, so I work with a lot of young people. And while I do think, I'm cautiously optimistic that things will hopefully continue in a good direction, but I recognize that the students that I work with specifically are very self-motivated and very aware, so it might be a small bubble of students, but the ones that I do work with are, they write debate columns for us, and they have such wonderful insight about really difficult topics. I am currently writing a story up with this wonderful local Hong Kong Chinese boy named Darren Lee, who a few months ago founded his own sock company where he uses art from struggling African artists, and 30% of the funds from the socks go back to the artist. And now he's also expanding it to domestic helpers as well and using their art. But unfortunately, the domestic helpers are not able to take the money, so it goes back to their family because of their contracts. So with self-starters like this, these kids hopefully advocating more and using their social media and, through word of mouth, I'm hoping that they can, be the change that we want to see in 20, 30 years. Because I think over time, it starts with the kids. So hopefully through policies in schools and changes in media, social media, and just through entertainment, to see more exposure and more education, and that's where it starts with.
Innocent, sort of a similar question to you. Where would you like to see asylum seekers reach as sort of an entity? Would you like to see more rights? Would you like to see more of them in university? What's your sense on that?
Yeah, for me, I think I feel like more university, potentially more jobs as well. This is Hong Kong. You need money, right? And I don't know why that's not clear to a lot of people, that people need money. And usually to make money, you actually, you have to sell your labor. And by doing that, you're contributing to the community. So, what I hope to see is more of these opportunities. I think more focus on aspirations. This is something you don't see as much when people are approaching whether asylum seekers or any of the disadvantaged communities. There is a tendency to be very interested in the exotic aspect as well as their troubles, which is fair. But I think it's time we start, even for people who tell stories, whether through media. I think it's time we start, looking at people's aspirations. Could you imagine every single day somebody come and ask you like, oh, what is it you? You are asylum seeker. I'm so sorry. Like every time a person sees an asylum seeker, the first thing they already feel pity. Like seriously, like do you think anybody likes pity that much? But if people actually go in and they are looking at aspiration, like, what do you dream about? Because we all have dreams, we have fears, we have dreams. What goals? If you had the opportunities, what could you do? That actually opens up a lot. For little kids, I don't usually appreciate when people, whether journalists or what, talking to little kids, interviewing them, and all they talk about is their limitations. It shouldn't be like that. In many ways, a lot of kids, when they come to me like, I didn't know I could study. I didn't know I could do anything. It's because of learned helplessness, and a lot of that was taught. With how questions get framed when people are talking to disadvantaged communities. But if somebody comes in and open up and realize, oh my goodness, I go to toilet and this guy goes to toilet too, that's a commonality, huh? I was like, I have fears and this guy must have fears too. And then I have dreams. This guy must have dreams. It's basically that humanity. It's not like this exotic other. It's that humanity as the base, and then hopefully, we see people, getting opportunities that they deserve.
If I can add also, I think the terminology ethnic minority, I'm having a fatigue with that word, and I think hopefully in a few years' time we can just be called Hong Kongers. In America you're called American, in Singapore you're Singaporean, but in Hong Kong you're still ethnic minority, refugee, domestic helper. It's just exhausting, putting us in a,
Yeah, I think that's a good note. Does any of the audience have questions, or feel free? Is there a mic that we could? Okay, we can start with him at the back.
I feel free and sad. We're talking about racial equity in Hong Kong without a single Chinese on the panel. Sad. We can't have equity without including our host community. We love them, and we want to teach them to love us. And so if we don't include them and begin to see ourselves as a special group of minorities, we will lose the plot. Because they too have suffered in Australia, in America, almost everywhere where millions of Chinese have gone. The first Exclusion Act in America was for the Chinese. The treatment of the Chinese gold miners in Australia is reprehensible by anybody's calculation. So let's not feel so special. Let's try to include our hosts. There's 96, 98% of them here. They need our love. So if we're going to have racial equity, it's because we recognize them as much as they recognize us. And they're just as capable of receiving our love as we are of theirs. Each one of us has to recognize the doorman, the liftman, or whatever buildings we go into each day and ask his name, recognize him. So whichever ethnic minority we represent, we show something that adds a little affection and little love into the other guy's life. So I'm sorry to mess up this discussion on racial equity, but you can't have racial equity without giving some form of equity to the majority as well. I've been here for 54 years. I stayed in Chungking Mansion before our friend was born. I worked for 1,800 Hong Kong dollars a day. I've been through the whole thing, and I can assure you there's nothing wrong with either the Hong Kong or the host population. What is wrong sometimes in the way in which we communicate with each other. If we show love, love will come back to us. Sorry for the interruption. Please forgive me.
Thank you.
Is there anyone with questions?
Yeah, I'm gonna be bad, and my question has a preamble. So there's been a lot of talk recently about how Hong Kong needs to do more to connect with the so-called global South. You know, do more with ASEAN, do more with the Middle East, do more with Africa, do more with Latin America, especially as, you know, other markets maybe are less open to us. Of course, but of course they say that, and they say things like, oh, we need to have more halal restaurants. That's how we'll get more Middle Eastern business here in Hong Kong. The truth of the matter is that compared to other global cities, Hong Kong isn't actually that international. I think it's 10% foreign-born compared to 30% in New York, 40% in London, and Singapore. You talk to people who were here in the 70s and 80s, and they say Hong Kong used to be better about this. They used to be better at having connections with Southeast Asia, and that got lost over time. This is a very long-winded preamble to get to my question. You know, when it like, how do these efforts towards racial equity, towards building diversity, supporting ethnic minorities, how will that relate to kind of Hong Kong's drive then to be a business hub for the quote-unquote global South? I mean, how are these things connected in terms of both like what has to happen here with Hong Kong's global positioning as an economy?
I'll take that one first, and you know, because this was really, it hit me hard when they were saying, oh, halal tourism, and I thought, man, we don't even get it right here, right? Like the taxi drivers, they were like encouraging them to greet people in Arabic, when I think a lot of taxi drivers say we don't even get English right. So I was like, oh gosh. And then, you know, we serve so many ethnic minority Muslim youths. Until today, they are being recruited in gangs, still having some drug issues and unemployment, yet they are not being given jobs. And this was a great way for the government to say, hey, you know what, we're gonna invest in our youth to be tour guides or tour docents. But we went to the Travel Industry Council and they said, by the way, in order to be a tour guide, you need to have a degree and you need to pass a couple of exams. So I'm just thinking, again, what a waste when, you know, they're having all this one belt, one road thing, and we have this whole community of young people that can cater straight with the language expertise, and yet I feel that's a whole, again, it's a great, you know, concept, but are they really doing the legwork where they have such a good community here to get people out there? You know, even now you see many Filipino tourists coming into Hong Kong, and you know, me and my wife were saying there's so many getting lost in Hong Kong streets. And you know, in Hong Kong, we're not the most friendliest when we give directions. And I just thought, again, a lot of these youth could be ambassadors for Hong Kong, and give Hong Kong that, you know, that friendly smile campaign that we're trying. And I think, again, we're losing out when the legwork is not being done.
Yeah, should I add one person who asked one question? Okay. I can add just quickly on that one. I think the idea, the intention is good. You know, trying to bring, you know, business. That's of course that's what every city, you know, country wants to do, is to bring in people from our side with talent and people with who can do business in that place. You know, I think that idea, great. I think the gap in the execution also, also, to Jeff's point as well, it's I think it's largely can you retain those people when they come here? You know, that's where the gap is. Because as Jeff already highlighted, we already have problems here. Like, why can't you fix what's happening here? You know, because when the people come, because I know some Africans and some black people, they come here, whether from the US or from the UK, from Jamaica or from Nigeria. They come here, oh my goodness, this is exciting, Hong Kong, hello Hong Kong. Hong Kong is opening up, they want us to come there. You know, because, you know, the Hong Kong, Belt and Road Office, or, you know, Hong Kong Invest HK has gone to Africa and they've spoken to people. And people are excited. But when they come here, they get a little disappointed because we haven't cleaned out the house a little bit. You know, so we got to clean our house first as Hong Kong. You know, or maybe we can bring people, but let's be cleaning up the house. And by cleaning up the house, we could have to work with the local communities. If you want to bring people from Turkey, you got to identify who are the Turkish in Hong Kong. Bring people from Africa, who are the Africans, and then see what their experiences are. Because once an African come here, that's, oh, what's in the, come here, they're so excited. Oh my goodness, Hong Kong, they want us here. I'm like, I don't know about that. You know, so you would see that. So, you know, so the first thing, the other person comes in and they realize, oh my goodness, nobody wants to sit next to me on the MTR. People are holding their nose when they see me, when I get on the MTR, because they, you know, and this is a guy who was coming here excited to do business. You know, that's a gap. So, and then when they come in, I did speak with some of the government officials on this. You know, you're saying people come, and then when they get to the airport at the immigration officer is going to give them a horrible time deporting people who actually shouldn't be deported. You know, so that's a gap in execution as well. So there's a lot of gaps within the execution. The strategy, the goal, beautiful, but the execution, mama day. Mm-hmm.
All right, I think we have time for 2 more questions. Can we?
Okay, now that's going to be hard to choose. I mean, they could ask all of them at the same time, and then we can see what.
Let's go with Manoj, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. So I will just tee off on the lovely first question and a statement. So thank you for asking that. My entire thing with this entire situation is on the positivity side of it. So while it's all right to talk about the minority bit and the ethnicity bit and all that kind of thing, why not talk about the positivities and the contributions? You know, when we want to take people to Chungking Mansion, also tell people, you know, this road that you're walking on, Modi Road, do you know where this came from? Where the Hari Lila Mansion, or take them out to watch the Hari Lila Mansion, or the Holiday Inn, or the Peninsula Hotel, or the Hong Kong Museum of Coastal Defense, which 2 years back inaugurated a wing, which talked about the Gurkhas' contribution to Hong Kong's security, and talked about how a multicultural race, which included British, Indian, Nepalese soldiers, defended and protected Hong Kong. So, I mean, wouldn't that be a better sell than this kind of a narrative and this kind of a thing where the entire proposition seems to be, you know what, we are victims. And we go with that kind of a thing that, oh, this is ethnic minorities and it has to be negative and it has to be victims. And if that is the kind of brand we are going to project, and that is the kind of brand, well, it's not even ethnic minorities. Ethnic minorities would include every race. So let's just say it's South Asian, brown-skinned folks. So if we are not going to project, and if we are not going to help people recall the positivity of the history, and if we are just going to constantly drumbeat about the negativities that we are victims, we are underserved, Why not tell them about every time you go and to a parking lot, where do you think the name Shroff came from? Just simple stuff, which is etched in the history of Hong Kong. So when we exude that kind of positivity, don't you think that is a better proposition and that is a better sell? If after that, and that is the easiest way, just give out positivity, just give out positive vibes, show the contribution of the non-ethnic Chinese stroke, non-Chinese speaking community, which in this case boils down to South Asians, then don't you think that's a better proposition and that's a better sell?
Is that question to me? Or?
No.
Yes. I'm going to start with that one because, no, thank you. Absolutely. I think you don't have to preach to me because I'm living this experience every day. I've been 40 years, but I think we have to also, focus on the harsh truths of our daily existence. And I think that's important. But I think if you're asking me and Innocent, we are both positively always impacting society. We are the ones every day walking these people into Chungking, talking about history. That's why we're creating the Diversity Hub. That's why he's talking about the black consciousness. I mean, there's no other people, but I think we also have to be real to the people that suffered in this journey. And there are people suffering every day. And as a social worker, it's painful when you walk with them, So we are, constantly telling the local public, yes, we're all Hong Kongers. We've suffered, but we're also all now trying to fix society today. In a very critical time in Hong Kong, I think harmony is very needed. And I think we play a huge part as ethnic minorities. A lot of people look to us as, you know what, they have gone through so much, yet they still believe in this city so much. And I think that's what we're about, And I think I'm so grateful. Again, thank you for that. That positive impact is important in this day and age. And that's why I'd love for you to come on Friday to our opening at the Diversity Hub. And you'll see that story, that 1850 to today, 2015. We end in that timeline with a photo of the Hong Kong national team because there's 3 black players in there, and that's Hong Kong for us, and that's what we want to say to the local public. We're all in this together. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yes, that's right. That's correct. That's correct. You are right.
We must recognize the damage that did. Today, or not today, but when I got here 50 years ago, the average grandmother would shush the New Territories child who was crying, please don't cry anymore, otherwise I will call the Molocha. She meant the hairy soldier from 1840.
Absolutely.
This does not mean they hate us.
We got a policeman right here, we know.
But that doesn't mean they hate us. That just means that is their cultural knowledge. And if we can offer more positive alternatives, things will come right.
And sure enough, sir, I'll give you an example because I always use this example every time. When I was in Tung Chung supermarket, in front of me was a mainland couple. They were buying lots of things, and people were kind of getting annoyed. And I was in front, and then behind me was this pawpaw, and all she was getting was fruits. All I did was one thing. I looked at her and I said, "Pawpaw, lei han xin, you go first." And you know what she said to me? She looked at me and go, "Ah, Hong Kong yan." That's it. So I keep sharing that to my young youth. You don't always need to learn the language immediately, but if you do certain things that are the normal Hong Kong traits, soon enough you'll fit in and you'll integrate. And I think, thank you, both of you.
But if we try to learn one phrase, one word in Cantonese each week, it doesn't take very long.
100%.
I remember I was a reporter in Hong Kong in 1971, and someone taught me to say, forgive the language, "Tu le lo mo," which is very rude to your mother. And
delay no more.
When I got into a tram and someone said that to me, I had already learned how to say, "Mo ha he sing sang." No need to be so polite. We can learn. We can join them. We can partner with them. They are as much our people as we are theirs.
Yeah, my entire mission of the Africa is rebranding blackness. We're trying to tell the positive story. We're trying to tell this in the different light. But we shouldn't also undermine people's experiences. It's very important. I walk out of the house in one single day. I experienced more than 60 forms of microaggression. And then if you tell me I should not talk about that, that's a problem. Your experience is not everybody's experience. Everybody's different. That's why we want everybody's stories out there. And that's the point of these kind of things.
Only then can change be made. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we only have time for one more question. But yeah.
I think people this side,
We look like we're.
I think any female,
Jay, you need to organize one next week.
So far?
Yeah, it looks like it.
We've had
Sorry, go
guys.
for it.
Okay, yeah, female.
I have a question for Anderson. I'm curious about that during the process that you integrate into the Hong Kong society, were there any helps or assistance that have left you a very deep impression? So any from the individuals or the society or the government or institutions so do you have such specific stories that could share with us? Thank you.
Okay. Oh, all right. So, I mean, I think I started by saying when I came in, Jeff was kind of like the first touch point of somebody who was helping me to integrate in the community. Especially on the humanitarian kind of needs when somebody who is coming in. And then at the same place at Christian Action, and then I met, we had the English class. It's kind of like a debated discussion, and then I met a professor, it's called Gordon Matthews, and then he's the one that, helped me in many ways and supported me in many of my steps to get into university, And then, speaking of the host, and then I met a young lady, her name was Chantel. She's ethnically Chinese, and then she's looking to have an impact in the community. And then she contacted a few people, and a lot of people directed her to me, like, you got to meet this young man, and then you can see what you could do. She was part of this, like some, some economic forum, whatever, World Economic thing, and then she, her and I, we organized my fundraiser for my university to go study. I remember going into that fundraiser, I was expecting to just get enough to pay for one semester, and then we brought the community, South Asians, Africans, experts. We brought in Chinese. We brought people. We met in a certain art space in Wok Chok Hang, and then we're like, guys, we gotta cook our food. Let's share our food. Let's share our stories, our music. And I had all these young refugees also supporting me because I was kind of like the first guy in front. They're like, oh, if you make it, maybe we can make it. So they were there to see that. And then I share my story, and these young people also share. We perform music. We did all that stuff. And remember, I was expecting only about, I think the university was about 60-something to 70K per semester if you're an international student. And then we got more than $1 million. And people wrote all these checks. I remember this guy coming, like, what you guys are doing is amazing. I know you were probably looking for one semester, but I'm just writing 100K check. And the guy wrote it while I'm watching. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is something. And then from there, that became a scholarship program for a lot of other young refugees who were coming after me because my money was paid up already in one go. I'd already planned to say, once I get to university, I'm going to graduate in 2 years so that I pay less. That was my strategy. But once I got this money, I'm like, I think now I have room to be lazy. But I had already planned, so I ended up going in for, I think, 2.5 years, or I think 3 or so, to try and, was this 4 years in Hong Kong, try and finish up early so I don't finish up the money. There's a lot of young people who are excited, who want to get into this. So you'd see a lot of people who are coming in, to support. Of course, there were naysayers along the way, but it was really an amazing journey to have a lot of community, helping me. And, I couldn't have been where I am, without the support of that kind of community. And, I appreciate every bit of it. Yeah, thank you for the question.
All right, final question to the gentleman on the left.
Oh gosh, James.
Yeah, okay, guys. Now, I think the operative word, as said by my colleague there, was love. All right? It's got to be a two-way street. It's no use licking your wounds and complaining about this and complaining about that. This big, bad world don't owe you nothing. You got to work for everything. Now, right now, Innocent, what I want you to do is get me 2 African youths. Boy or girl, don't matter. They got to know some Chinese, speak it, maybe read and write a bit of it, because I just got 2 Sikhs into the police college. And I want to get 2 Africans into the police college.
That will be the first.
To make this place a real cosmopolitan center.
I like the steps. This is very beautiful. Thank you so much.
It's not
I will.
beautiful. It's going to be a lot of hard work because John and I are going to organize Chinese tuition for them to bring them up to scratch so they can pass this goddamn exam. And I agree that without these Chinese exams, we can have a lot more ethnic minorities serve in government as it was when I joined the police in 1964. And then there was a lot of diversity in government, in the police. And I would like to bring that back.
I will take
And
you on that.
when we get all that, that is the day when Hong Kong becomes one. Thank you.
Thank you. Definitely taking you. If anyone wants to offer more Africans to come to become the first ones, please come to me. I was talking to Jeff yesterday that we don't have a social worker who is
That's right.
African. I'm gonna make sure I'm pushing you on that as well. So
Brilliant.
police, we need more. I mean, that would be cool. I mean, you can see people are like, oh, look at the Leng Tsais there, being the police. I'm excited about that. Definitely, I'm not going out without your number today.
Give me the materials and I will do the job.
Definitely, we'll do that.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. I've been your moderator, Jay. I'm a freelance journalist and FCC fellow. Thank you to all 3 of my speakers as well. Just want to clarify something very quickly. The goal of this wasn't to solve racism or racial equity. It was meant to be a very balanced conversation about positive things like the diversity hub